This story begins with a single swipe, a flash of plastic, a beep, and a quiet thought that whispered, "It's only $49 a month." Ethan stood at the counter of a bright electronics store, the smell of new devices thick in the air. Screens shimmered like stars in a digital sky, and the newest phone, sleeky, flawless, wrapped in promises, called to him. He'd waited months for this launch. He'd watched every review, compared every feature. Now finally, he could have it. Not by saving, not by waiting, but by something far easier installments. 0% interest for 12 months, the salesman said, with a practiced smile. Just sign here. It's basically free money. Ethan laughed. He wasn't naive, or so he thought. He had a steady job, a decent paycheck, and a sense that life was finally moving forward. A new phone felt like a small reward, something he deserved. He tapped the screen, his name appearing in digital ink. Swipe, approved. The receipt printed out like a prophecy, small lines of text that he didn't bother to read. Outside, the city buzzed. Neon lights reflected in glass towers. Cars hummed past, and Ethan lifted his new phone. The world mirrored in its flawless screen. He felt powerful, connected, upgraded. But beneath the thrill, there was something else, a quiet, invisible shift. Something that didn't feel like danger yet, something that felt like freedom. That night, he couldn't stop scrolling. Not through social media, but through his own sense of progress. He told himself it was smart. I didn't pay $1,000 up front. I'm managing my money. In that single thought lived a trap, a subtle rewrite of how he measured worth. We often think financial traps arrive with warning signs, bills, overdue letters, collection calls, but sometimes they start with comfort, with convenience, with the soft hum of a credit approval that feels like a gift. Ethan started noticing something. Everywhere he looked there were offers like this. Buy now, pay later, 0 interest, small monthly payments. Each one whispered the same message, you can have it now. And that message, in a world hungry for instant validation, is almost impossible to resist. A week later, Ethan met his friend Leo for coffee. Leo was the cautious type, the kind who paid cash for everything, and still balanced a checkbook. He raised an eyebrow when Ethan showed off his new phone. "Nice one," Leo said. "How much did it set you back?" Ethan grinned. "Nothing yet. Just $49 a month." Leo's smile faded. "You're paying for it 12 times, man. That's not nothing." Ethan shrugged. "It's interest-free. Might as well keep my money flexible." Leo sipped his coffee. "Sure, until you do that with 5 other things." Ethan laughed it off. But that sentence, "until you do that with 5 other things," stayed with him longer than he expected. 2 weeks later, Ethan was back in the same store. Not for a phone this time, for a pair of headphones. They weren't essential. But the deal? Too good. "Add them to your existing plan?" the cashier asked. He nodded. Swipe. Approved. There it was again, that soft high. That dopamine rush that came not from buying, but from deferring the cost. He wasn't spending money. He was spending time, future peace. Narration shifts slightly, reflective. Most people don't realize how habits form not in days, but in emotions. When something feels good and costs nothing today, it becomes a ritual of instant relief. And like all rituals, it demands repetition. Ethan's installments were small enough to ignore. Each line on his credit statement looked harmless. $49 for phone, $17 for headphones, tiny numbers scattered like breadcrumbs. But those breadcrumbs led somewhere, a path not toward ownership, but toward obligation. He didn't see it yet. How could he? He was still in the honeymoon phase, that warm blur of having, without yet paying. One night, as he lay in bed scrolling through online stores, an ad appeared. Upgrade your life, only $29 a month. He smiled. That phrase only was like magic. It didn't just lower the price, it lowered resistance. He clicked the link. He didn't buy anything that night, but he didn't have to. The ad had already planted something deeper, an idea that satisfaction could be sliced into monthly pieces, manageable and endless. In the background, a soft rain started tapping against his window. He looked at his reflection on the black phone screen. For a brief moment, it looked like someone else. Someone more successful, more complete. But then the screen dimmed, and the illusion faded. He put the phone down. A text notification blinked. Your first payment of $49 will be processed tomorrow. He smiled faintly, not realizing how symbolic that moment was, the first quiet trade between the present and the future. A deal he'd made not with money, but with time. You've probably met someone like Ethan, smart, ambitious, the kind of person who calls himself financially aware, just not obsessed with saving. He still paid his bills on time. He still put a little money aside each month. So when the second, third and fourth installment plans came along, it didn't feel reckless. It felt efficient. He started small. A smartwatch, just $22 a month. Then a new sofa for his apartment, $50 a month. Then a streaming bundle, an upgraded laptop, and finally a gym membership that came with its own shiny payment app. Each purchase in isolation made perfect sense. Taken together, they began to weave something else, a net made of comfort, tightening 1 month at a time. There's a strange psychology behind installments. It doesn't just break payments apart, it breaks responsibility apart. The pain of paying dissolves into droplets so small you barely feel them. It's like a painkiller for the wallet, one that works so well you forget the wound is still there. Ethan didn't notice the shift. He just knew he felt more in control than ever. His life finally looked like the one he'd imagined in college. Stylish, modern, balanced. At least, that's what the reflection in his apartment window told him each night. One Saturday morning, his sister dropped by for coffee. She looked around the apartment, the new furniture, the 4K TV mounted perfectly on the wall. "Wow," she said, "you've really leveled up." Ethan laughed. "Just making monthly magic happen," she frowned. "You mean credit magic?" He waved it off. "Come on, everyone does it now. It's how people afford things without draining savings." She smiled gently. "Yeah, just remember, you're not avoiding payment, you're delaying pain." He chuckled, but her words lingered. That phrase, delaying pain, felt uncomfortably accurate. The following week, Ethan sat in a cafe, checking his banking app. Salary in, $3,200. Expenses out, $2,100 a day. It looked fine on paper, manageable, but scrolling down he realized most of his expenses weren't rent or food. They were fragments of past decisions, little monthly ghosts. $49 phone, $17 headphones, $20 watch, $56, sofa $12 streaming bundle, $89 gym, and health app, $37 laptop. He didn't even need to add them up. The total wasn't the point. It was the feeling that his money wasn't really his anymore. It was already spoken for. He stared at his coffee, swirling the foam with a spoon. "Just temporary," he whispered to himself. But it didn't sound convincing. Narration softens almost intimate, like a voiceover in a documentary. Modern finance has a language built to comfort us. Words like flexible, manageable, accessible, they replace fear with familiarity, and we buy into it not because we're foolish, but because it fits the story we want to believe. That we can have control and convenience, that we can spend like the rich without being rich, that we can borrow from tomorrow without consequence. Ethan wasn't living recklessly, he was living the modern way, the soft debt lifestyle, a life where everything feels affordable, and nothing truly is. One night, he scrolled through an online store for clothes. A digital banner popped up. Pay in 4 easy installments, no credit check. He smiled. 4 clicks later, a new jacket was on its way. But when the confirmation email arrived, something about the words hit differently. Your payment plan is now active. Payment plan. Not purchase, not order. Plan. He didn't buy a jacket. He entered an agreement. A contract with time invisible but binding. A month later, Ethan met Leo again. They sat on a park bench overlooking the city. Leo was scrolling through his phone, trying to book a trip. "I'm thinking of flying to Lisbon," Leo said. "Paid for it all up front. Feels cleaner." Ethan smirked. "Cleaner, but heavier." "Maybe," Leo said. "But you know what's heavier? Debt that pretends to be light." Ethan didn't answer. Leo looked over. "You still doing those installment things?" "Some," Ethan replied. "Just easier to manage." "Or easier to ignore," Leo said softly. The words landed like a weight in his chest. Not because they were harsh, but because they were true. As days passed, Ethan began noticing the rhythm of his life wasn't his anymore. Every payday followed the same cycle: money in, deductions out, the same notifications, the same auto-pay confirmations. Every month, he bought himself another 30 days of ownership. He didn't own his stuff. He rented his future. Yet there was still comfort in it. A strange comfort, the illusion of control in a system designed to keep you feeling safe, while it quietly feeds on your habits. That illusion works because it doesn't attack suddenly. It whispers. It rewards you for compliance. It praises you for being responsible when you pay your bills on time. It even sends thank you emails. Thank you for your payments. Gratitude from a company that profits from your delay. A smile from the wolf as you hand it your handkerchief. One evening, Ethan received a new offer. Upgrade your credit limit. Enjoy more flexibility. He hesitated. For the first time, he didn't click immediately. Something inside him felt tired, not broke, just drained. He looked around his apartment. Everything was beautiful. Everything was his, and yet none of it really felt owned. He exhaled deeply. The TV hummed softly in the background, a commercial playing. "Buy now, pay later, because you deserve it." Ethan smiled faintly. That line used to excite him. Now it sounded like a warning. It didn't happen all at once. That's the trick about pressure. It doesn't crush you overnight. It builds quietly, molecule by molecule, until you can't remember what air used to feel like. For Ethan, it began with small moments of discomfort. A declined transaction at the gas station. A forgotten payment reminder blinking in his inbox. A slight pause before swiping his card as if his hand knew something his mind refused to admit. He still told himself he was fine. After all, the numbers still worked on paper, but something inside him didn't. One Sunday morning, Ethan sat at his kitchen table surrounded by papers, bills, receipts, statements. He wasn't sure why he'd taken them all out. Maybe to get organized, maybe to prove he still had control. Each envelope carried a polite tone, friendly reminder. Then a firmer one, payment due. Then one that didn't bother with politeness at all. He lined them up, tracing the dates with his finger. Phone, headphones, sofa, gym, jacket, streaming. It looked like a list of little victories until he saw the totals. Interest, late fees, over-limit charges, all invisible before, now glowing under the kitchen light. He sat there, silent. For the first time, the word installment felt like what it really was, a promise with a chain attached. Outside, the city was alive as usual. Cars rushed by, people carried coffee cups, store windows flashed new offers. Life went on, bright, busy, expensive. Ethan watched from behind the glass, realizing how much of his life had become performance, the image of success, the sound of comfort, the silence of debt. He used to think debt was loud collectors calling, warnings flashing, but it was the silence that scared him more, the quiet erosion of peace. That night he woke at 3:17 a.m. His phone screen lit up on the nightstand. Payment due tomorrow. 56 House. He stared at it, motionless. The glow of the notification painted his face pale blue. It felt like a pulse, steady, inevitable, cold. He got up, poured water, sat in the dark. He tried to remember when he'd started feeling so cornered. Maybe it was when he stopped checking his balance. Maybe it was when payday stopped feeling like victory and started feeling like triage. Narration softens analytical but empathetic. Debt doesn't just live in bank accounts. It lives in the mind. It eats from the inside, not all at once, but in quiet bites of worry. Psychologists call it cognitive load. When your brain is constantly tracking bills, deadlines, balances, it leaves less space for joy, creativity, connection. You don't even notice it happening. You just start living smaller. Ethan felt it everywhere, in his sleep, in his appetite, in the way he ignored calls from unknown numbers, even in his laughter, thinner now, rehearsed. A few days later, he met Leo again. They hadn't seen each other in weeks. "You look tired," Leo said. "Yeah, work's been crazy," Ethan lied. They walked down the street, passing a glowing billboard. "Live now, pay later." The ad showed a smiling couple holding shopping bags, bathed in golden light. Leo nodded toward it. That slogan should end with, "And worry forever." Ethan smiled weakly. "You're starting to sound like my conscience." "Maybe your conscience has been trying to call and you keep hitting decline." They both laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that hides truth inside it. Ethan looked up at the billboard again. He wondered how many people walking by had the same weight pressing against their chest, invisible, unspoken, normalized. The next month was tighter. A client delayed payment at work, and his usual cushion vanished. He started juggling moving dates, adjusting autopay settings, skipping dinners out. Every day became a little negotiation with himself. "I'll pay that one next week. I'll just cover the minimum for now." It worked barely. But there's a cost to survival mode. It steals the luxury of long-term thought. And without long-term thought, there's no strategy, only reaction. He wasn't building a life anymore. He was maintaining one. One night, his sister called. "Hey, I'm thinking of buying a car. You know a good bank for loans?" Ethan froze. "You're buying on credit?" "Yeah, it's just easier," she said. "Low monthly payment." He almost said something about traps, about how easy hides the danger, but he didn't. He didn't feel like a preacher. He felt like proof. After they hung up, he sat on the floor beside his bed, surrounded by the quiet hum of his possessions. Everything around him was beautiful and borrowed. Every object told a story of excitement that had faded too soon. He closed his eyes. He could almost feel it, the invisible weight pressing against his chest. Not enough to crush him, just enough to keep him from standing tall. Narration, reflective. We often talk about debt as numbers, but what if we saw it as gravity, something that doesn't kill you, but keeps you from rising? That's what Ethan felt now. Not panic, not failure, just gravity. He still had his job, his apartment, his health. From the outside, nothing was wrong, but inside something had shifted, a subtle, irreversible understanding. He wasn't spending money, he was spending himself. And somewhere deep down, he knew if nothing changed, eventually, something would break. It started with an email. "We regret to inform you that your department will be restructuring." One line, sterile, polite, final. In the space of a few sentences, Ethan's steady ground disappeared. He read it twice, then a third time, as if repetition could change the words. It didn't. The message stayed the same. So did the sinking feeling in his chest. For the first time in years, silence filled his mornings. No alarm, no commute. Just time the kind he used to wish for. But time, he realized, was different when it wasn't earned. It wasn't freedom. It was exposure. And soon, exposure turned into fear. At first, he believed he could manage. He'd find a new job in a few weeks, maybe a month. He had savings, not much, but enough for rent and food. Then the due dates began to pile up. Each payment, small on its own, now felt like a predator circling closer. $49, $17, $56, $37. Tiny sums that had once been invisible now roared with meaning. Ethan called the bank. He waited on hold, listening to a recorded voice thank him for his patience. "Due to high call volume, your estimated wait time is..." He hung up. He opened his credit app instead. Numbers glowed red. Balances overdue. Minimums increased. He closed the app, sat back, stared at the ceiling, and for the first time he felt something he'd never associated with money before: shame. The days blurred. He sent resumes, scrolled job listings, told himself to stay calm, but calm doesn't pay interest. And the bills didn't care about effort. The tone of the emails shifted. First, gentle reminders, then warnings, then the kind of language that sounds almost personal in its coldness. Failure to remit payment may result in further action. Further action. He didn't know what that meant, but the words alone were enough to keep him awake at night. One afternoon, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Mr. Miles, yes. This is a courtesy call from—" He hung up. The voice was polite, professional, merciless. He didn't want to hear it again, but the calls kept coming. Different numbers, different voices, always the same message. The past was catching up. Narration slows, darkens cinematic tone. In the movies, collapse is dramatic, a single moment of disaster, a clear fall from grace, but in real life, it's quieter. It happens in whispers, the unopened emails, the ignored notifications, the dinner plans cancelled because something came up. Ethan's collapse came not with a bang, but with a long, exhausted sigh. He started avoiding his friends. He told his sister everything was fine. He smiled when people asked how he was doing. The way drowning people wave from the surface. Weeks passed. Savings shrank. Debt grew. And the city, in its indifference, kept glowing. One night, he walked past the same electronics store where it all began. Through the window, the new model of his phone gleamed under bright lights. Now only $59 a month. He stopped and stared at it. It looked familiar, almost mocking, like a reflection of the man he used to be, the one who thought freedom came in 12 easy payments. He looked at his own reflection in the glass. Older, paler, eyes heavy with the weight of invisible numbers. For a moment he felt anger, not at the bank, or the ads, or even the system, at himself, for believing comfort was control, for trading peace for plastic. A week later, the electricity bill bounced, then rent. Then the card declined at the grocery store. He stared at the checkout screen. Payment failed. The cashier smiled politely. Maybe try another card. He nodded, fumbling, pretending it was a glitch, but he knew it wasn't a glitch. It was consequence. He walked home with one bag of groceries and £1,000 of regret. Narration deepens, introspective, poetic. Debt doesn't destroy you suddenly. It erodes your sense of worth slowly, silently, until you start believing the balance defines the person. Ethan stopped checking his phone altogether. Each vibration felt like judgment, each message another reminder of failure. He wasn't lazy, he wasn't irresponsible, he was just human. A man who'd been taught that having things meant having value, and that monthly payments were the price of belonging. But now, belonging cost too much. One night, unable to sleep, he sat by the window again. The city lights blurred through the rain. A commercial played faintly from a neighbour's TV. Enjoy life, now pay later. He laughed softly, the sound brittle. Then whispered, almost to himself, I already did. He picked up his credit card, turned it in his hand. It was light, ridiculously light, for something that carried so much weight. He thought about cutting it, but not yet, not until he knew what came after. Narration slows, reflective and cinematic. There's a moment in every downfall when silence becomes unbearable, and that's when change begins to whisper. Ethan didn't know it yet, but this was his turning point. He was about to learn that collapse isn't the end. It's the moment you finally hear what the noise had been hiding. And beneath all the numbers, all the fear, all the polished marketing, a quiet truth was waiting. You can't buy your way out of emptiness. You can only outgrow it. The first morning of change didn't look heroic. There was no sunrise breaking through storm clouds. No grand declaration of starting over. Just Ethan, sitting on the floor, surrounded by unopened envelopes, holding a pair of scissors. He stared at his credit card, the same one that had once felt like freedom. He placed it on the table. The room was silent, except for the sound of his breathing. One deep breath in, one exhale out, then snip. The sound was small, but it echoed. It wasn't victory. It was surrender, the kind that precedes healing. In the days that followed, Ethan didn't try to fix everything at once. He just tried to face it. He opened every letter, every email, every app he'd been avoiding. He wrote down numbers, all of them. Total debt, minimum payments, interest rates. For the first time, the monster had a face, and strangely, that made it less terrifying. Because clarity, even painful clarity, is a kind of peace. He started calling each creditor awkward, nervous, ashamed. He expected judgment. Instead, he got routine professionalism. Payment plans, extensions, negotiations. He realized something profound. The system that had seemed so intimidating wasn't built to forgive, but it was built to function. And once he stopped hiding, it began to work with him. One night, he found a podcast called Debt-Free Journeys. Ordinary people talking about how they'd crawled out of holes like his. He listened for hours, their voices blending into a single message. You're not broken. You just believed the wrong story. That line hit him hard. Because it was true, he had believed a story told by glowing ads and smiling influencers, a story that said happiness can be financed. But now he was writing a different one, slower, quieter, real. Weeks turned into months. He got a part-time job delivering groceries, humble work but steady. He sold the gadgets he didn't use, cancelled subscriptions he didn't need. Every dollar mattered not because it was much, but because it was his. Each small act of discipline became a form of self-respect. Every meal cooked at home felt like a win. Every bill paid on time was a declaration. I'm back in charge. Narration softens warm, reflective. Financial recovery isn't just about money. It's about identity. When you start changing how you handle money, you're not just changing habits, you're changing who you believe yourself to be. Ethan used to see himself as a consumer. Now he saw himself as a custodian of his own future. He learned something else too. Debt had never been his real problem. Disconnection was. He had been disconnected from value, from patience, from enoughness. And slowly he was learning to reconnect. He started journaling at night, just a few lines each day. What did I buy today? Why did I buy it? Did it move me closer to peace or further away? Some answers hurt, some surprised him, most humbled him. But one entry stood out, written in shaky handwriting after a long day of work. I used to think money was about freedom. Now I see freedom is how you treat money. His sister visited one afternoon. She noticed the apartment looked emptier, fewer gadgets, fewer decorations, but it felt lighter too. You finally Marie Kondoed your life, huh? She teased. He smiled, more like financial exorcism. She laughed, then grew quiet. You seem different. Ethan nodded. I stopped pretending I was rich. Turns out, it's cheaper to be honest. Later that evening, he walked through the city again. Same streets, same stores. But the lights didn't call to him anymore. He saw the signs 0% APR, easy monthly payments, not as invitations, but as traps laid with velvet bait. He didn't feel angry, just aware. Awareness, he realized, was worth more than anything those ads could sell. Narration deepens thoughtful, cinematic. We rarely talk about money as something emotional, but it is. Every dollar carries a feeling: pride, fear, hope, guilt. Ethan had lived years chasing feelings instead of facing them. Now, he faced them first, and the spending urge lost its power. He started reading books on personal finance, not to get rich, but to get wise. He learned about compound interest, the invisible force that had worked against him for so long. He finally understood the math, but more importantly, the metaphor. Compound interest, he wrote in his journal, is like gravity, it pulls on everything. But if you climb in the right direction, it can lift you too. By the end of that year, the change was visible. The debt wasn't gone yet, but it was shrinking. The fear wasn't gone, but it no longer ruled him. He even started saving, just a few dollars each week. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. And beginnings, he learned, are worth celebrating. One night, sitting by his window, the same spot where he'd once drowned in dread, Ethan looked out at the city again. The lights were still bright. The advertisements still promised the same illusions. But now, he saw something different between them: silence, space, peace. He didn't crave what he saw anymore. He simply observed it with gratitude, like someone who had finally stepped out of the storm. He whispered softly to himself, "I'm not out yet, but I'm free." 2 years later, Ethan woke before sunrise. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. The apartment was smaller now, simpler. A few plants by the window, a sturdy desk, a coffee mug that read "Paid in full." The air felt lighter, like someone had opened a window in his life and let the past drift out. He poured coffee and sat at his desk, opening a worn notebook, the same one where he'd once scribbled lists of debts and payments. Today, the page was blank, because for the first time in years there was nothing left to pay. The final loan had cleared the day before. No more reminders, no more red numbers, just space, and silence, the kind that doesn't echo but hums softly with peace. He'd thought this moment would feel explosive, like fireworks or applause, but it didn't. It felt quiet, and that was perfect. Freedom, he realized, isn't loud. It's still. It's breathing without checking your balance. Later that morning, Ethan met Leo for breakfast. They hadn't seen each other in a while. Leo grinned as Ethan walked in. "You look lighter," Ethan laughed. "I finally cut the last chain. Debt-free." "Completely." Leo raised his coffee cup. "To freedom, then?" Ethan smiled. "To real freedom." They clinked cups, and for a moment, the world slowed. Two friends, sunlight pouring through the window, the hum of a cafe around them. Nothing fancy, but everything enough. After breakfast, Ethan took a walk through the city. Same streets, same store windows, the same glossy ads flashing. Buy now, pay later. Zero interest. Live without limits. He paused outside the same electronics store, where his story had begun. A new model gleamed behind the glass, thinner, faster, smarter, and right beneath it, the familiar offer, only $49 a month. He stared at it for a moment, then smiled. He didn't feel temptation. He felt gratitude, not for the product, but for the lesson it represented. He whispered softly, "Not this time," and kept walking. Narration slows reflective, cinematic. Freedom doesn't announce itself. It lives in small choices, the ones no one sees. Like walking past what used to control you. Like saying no, not out of fear, but out of peace. Ethan no longer wanted more. He wanted enough, and enough, he discovered, feels infinite once you stop chasing. In the months that followed, he began writing online short essays about money, mindset, and modern life. Not financial advice, just stories, human stories. One of his posts went viral. The cost of paying later. He told it all: the phone, the comfort, the collapse, the awakening. Thousands of comments flooded in. People thanked him for saying what they were afraid to admit. That behind every easy payment lies a quiet trade time, energy, peace. He realized then that his story wasn't just about debt. It was about ownership. Not of things, but of self. A few weeks later, Ethan volunteered to teach a financial literacy class at a local community centre. The room was small, a few folding chairs, a whiteboard, and a dozen faces that looked like his used to. Tired, hopeful, overwhelmed. He began simply. "I'm not a financial expert," he said. "I'm just someone who's been lost and found again." He told them about dopamine and marketing psychology, about how money and emotion dance together, one leading, one following. about how debt feels like gravity and how small steps can defy it. One woman raised her hand. "What's the first step?" she asked. Ethan smiled. "Honesty," he said. "Not with the bank, with yourself. You can't change what you won't face." That night, walking home under the city lights, Ethan thought about how different those lights looked now. Once, they had been lures flashing promises. Now, they were just lights, beautiful, harmless, distant. He stopped at a crosswalk, watching the red signal glow. A thought rose quietly in his mind. Freedom isn't about buying whatever you want. It's about not needing to. He crossed the street calm, steady, whole. Narration builds toward closure, poetic, resonant. For years, Ethan had mistaken motion for progress, convenience for control, spending for success. Now he understood, money doesn't define us. Our relationship with it does. He'd learned to live on less but feel more. He'd traded possessions for perspective, and it turned out to be the best deal he'd ever made. That night, he sat again by his window, the same view, but a different man. The city shimmered below, alive with noise and colour. He took a slow sip of tea and smiled faintly. On the table beside him was an envelope unopened, a pre-approved credit offer. He picked it up, tore it in half, and tossed it into the bin without a second thought. Then he opened his notebook and wrote, "Freedom isn't earned once, it's practiced daily. Every choice is a vote for the life you want." He closed the book. Leaning back, he watched the reflection of the lights in the window, the same lights that had once tempted him. Now they looked like stars. Narration fades, final line echoing softly. In a world that sells happiness by the month, real wealth is the peace you don't have to finance. If you've ever felt trapped by your finances, remember this: debt is not a moral failure. It's a story we're taught to live in, but stories can be rewritten. Real freedom doesn't begin when you earn more. It begins when you stop letting money control the way you see yourself. You don't have to buy your worth, you only have to own your choices. Because peace, in the end, isn't something you purchase, it's something you practice.